because the world is basically self-sustaining because of the way Locke describes it. But what he points out is that Locke himself gives the groundwork for us to be critical of Locke by saying that there are primary qualities of objects which we cannot see. And yet they must be there because there's that interaction between those objects and our senses, and that's what causes our sense awareness of those things, right? So that's really, I still would say, a very commonsensical point of view that we have today, even though Locke is the one that comes up with this. So you can see it's not a very old point of view. It's not like everybody grows up with this point of view. No. From my way of arguing here is, that the development of ideas has an impact on common life. How they spread through life is not, everybody learns it all at once, etc. But so I would agree with Berkeley that this is a threat to the deist or the theist point of view, more the theist point of view. I mean, if you accept Locke, you're not going to feel like praying helps anything, But the criticism here is that this is going to lead to skepticism. By having a mind that cannot interact with the real world as it is, we can't know the qualities of things. The primary qualities are a hypothesis about the nature of things based on the senses that we have. But we cannot actually see the things in themselves. In fact, this is going to lead to major changes in our epistemology or theory of knowledge. And as a result of that, we end up becoming skeptics and atheists. And Berkeley's argument is, well, this is written as kind of a platonic dialogue between these two characters, and as a result, it's literature. He's trying to write this dialogue as a literary way of persuading people not to believe John Locke, or Sir Isaac Newton, for that matter, who is in agreement with Locke. All right, so that's now this was not his first text. We go to, let's go to Wikipedia, which is very handy. Oh, I don't want that one first. I want George. Let's go to George here. And you could go, obviously every time you hit on search, you could find the IEP or the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy or others. There are quite a few sources out there that are much more academic and give you lots more stuff to read and details about these folks. I just keep picking the Wikipedia because I like it. Gives you a nice picture of him when George was born. Obviously, you can see he's still got a baby face there. And notice that you get his birth date, and born 1685. So he's born in Ireland, but his parents are from Britain. He considered himself Irish. If you were Irish, you wouldn't have thought of him as Irish. But in any case, he was literally born in Ireland. Went to school where Kilkenny. Notice where that is. Anybody been to Ireland? Me neither, actually. And yet, most of my ancestors are probably from there, someplace. Actually, they're probably from up here in the red zone, because they were the Scots that got sent to Northern Ireland to infest the Irish. And eventually the Irish kicked us out and sent us to Philadelphia, where we screwed everything up there. There are still lots of Jamisons in Philadelphia. But in any case, down here is hardly there's nothing. I've cruised around using Google Earth, and it's like farms and stuff, and that's just about it. But there's little villages and schools, and so I visited the school where he went. That's cute, it's there. They obviously had an education. He graduated from there, and then went to Dublin, which is up, it's still in the green, but it's much further north, in Dublin, the capital of the Republic of Ireland, right? As opposed to the provinces up on the top, which are actually part of England. This is Protestant. This is Catholic. So there's the big difference. Remember, they used to war with one another. In fact, feelings are still hurt over that. My one friend, Will Jacobs, was studying in Dublin, and as he was walking around as a young man, living there but studying and doing work in the library and so on, people would ask him, "You Catholic or Protestant?" And he answered, "I'm an atheist." And they paused a minute and they said, "Are you a Catholic atheist or a Protestant atheist?" I suppose he didn't want to say he was Jewish. Actually, today he's Orthodox. Russian Orthodox. How does that happen? It depends on location. He lives in St. Paul now. He used to be a professor of history here. In any case, Barclay goes to Dublin to what's the name of the university in Dublin? Shoot, can't think of it right now. It was created by a saint, and now I can't even think of his name. It probably says somewhere, right? Biography. Trinity. There you go. So Trinity College. Obviously Catholic, right? Trinity. You have three. The triangle thing. By the way, that's where the Book of Kells is kept, in that building. If you go in, that's a big, really ancient Celtic book, painted with all kinds of gaudy pictures. It's the Bible, but it's the Book of Kells. Let's see it this way. You can't actually see the whole thing because they open it to a particular page and it's in a glass case, so you can't flip through it or anything. You can just see whatever page they have it open to. And it's the art that is. By the way, the Irish, did the Irish save civilization? You ever heard of that book? No? How did the Irish save civilization? Notice I avoided Amazon. How the Irish saved civilization. So he says the same thing in another book about the Jewish people, and so that's his technique for selling books. Notice it was a bestseller. If you're Irish, you got to buy that. But basically, when we had what was referred to as the Dark Ages, when everybody no longer supported the monasteries where all the libraries were, the Irish did. So they still had these libraries with monks that were kept, at least fed. and they were able to reproduce books. The trouble with books during the Middle Ages was there are other things that like books more than people do. Mice, for example, and bookworms and things. And so books had to be reproduced constantly in order to keep them there, because otherwise they would literally rot to death. And so you need a monastery full of monks that sit there and spend their days gardening a little bit, praying a lot, eating, but at the same time spending most of the time they can with light, because you don't kindle fire in a library. But they copy the books, that are falling apart, and keep them updated with new copies. So the Irish saved civilization because they kept the books going, and then once the civilization kind of returned to the rest of Europe, those monks were the ones that headed in and started becoming teachers and bringing that education back to the rest of Europe. So that's the argument you get in this particular book.
The education being the teachings of the Catholic Church.
That's the only one there. Yeah. It's the rhetoric, logic, grammar that you get, which was in Latin, and then astronomy, math, geometry, and music. So the quadrivium and the trivium. So those are basically the way colleges were set up. I think still are. There are still some that are set up that way. So Trinity, Dublin. And he graduated from there, and his first book, Berkeley, was this one, An Essay Towards a New Theory of Vision, which the main thing that I get from it is that thanks to our having stereoscopic eyes, is that the right way to pronounce it? Right? There's two of them. It gives us kind of an angular way of viewing things. And apparently he was the one that seems silly, but apparently he's the one that realized that gives us depth perception. As a result of that, we can tell distance, because our eyes do this instead of just, if you just have one, you couldn't tell the depth of something, but because you have two eyes, unlike my wife, who has two eyes, but the one didn't work with the other one, so she could drive, but she's always guessing. It's not comfortable to drive with her. And the kids, I don't know how the kids survived, but in any case, he gives us that. But this actually ties into where he's eventually going to go with this, because this is a whole new thing. How are we seeing things? Obviously, there's particles entering into our eyes, but our minds are not physical. And so even if there were physical particles coming into our senses and our senses were receiving this sight, how does that become part of our conscious awareness? That's part of that whole hard problem that David Chalmers talks about, the hard problem of consciousness. Okay, we have a physical body that's doing all this stuff, but if you're of the point of view that the mind is not physical, as of course I think most scientists today are, so that they're understanding that this interaction is physical and the mind is physical, and so you've got data that's coming in and it's physically manipulated in the brain through the neurons and everything else. And even if, by the way, you're saying that it's happening in the microtubules, so that it's also a quantum computer type mind, that's still physical. But from his point of view, as an Anglican minister, this is spirit. Our minds are spirit, souls. Descartes' problem, right? You can't have have the soul interacting physically, with the physical world, right? Because there's no connection between them. So for Berkeley, somehow our eyes perceiving all this stuff has to be more spiritual than a physical thing. And so he's already leading to the idea that these aren't physical objects that we're seeing. They're spiritual objects. So that everything is spiritual instead of physical. Right? Seems ridiculous today. But that's essentially what he's doing in this book, is developing that. Remember